Miss Constance Aldwin had spent 6 weeks on her knees, 6 weeks among 5,000 flood-ruined books, and the Duke of Corvedale still did not know her name. He said it into the doorway, over her bent head, to his steward. Pay her and send her home. She did not look up. She finished the shelf she was on. 2 servants stood in that doorway. By supper the whole servants' hall had the sentence, word for word. In that house a woman was dismissed the way a chair is moved. Spoken about. Never spoken to. Pay her and send her home. That same evening he opened the finished catalogue she had left on his desk and found, itemized without one word of comment, 40 years of everything his house had lost, and 11 books that were never his. If your work was ever dismissed in one careless sentence you were never even meant to hear, this story is for you. Before we go on, subscribe and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. I read every one. Now, let me take you to Northumberland in the winter of 1873. The North Library of Corvedale Hall smelled of wet paper and cold stone. A leader pipe had burst in the October gales. The autumn flood had come in under the sills and stood a hand deep across the floor. By the time anyone thought to bail it, the lower shelves had drunk their fill. 5,000 volumes, calf and vellum and cheapboard alike, swollen, foxed, the ink of them blooming like bruises. They had sent to Cambridge for someone who knew books, and Cambridge had sent Miss Constance Aldwin. She was not what they expected. She was 9 and 20, plain-dressed, quiet-handed, the daughter of a bookseller off Trinity Street, keeping her dead father's trade alive with her own 2 hands. She arrived with a leather roll of tools and a manner that asked for nothing. And she went to work. You could learn a great deal about Constance Aldwin by watching her hands. She could date a binding by its headband. She could hold a leaf up to the grey window and read the watermark in it and tell you the year the paper was made and the mill that made it. She could take a quarto that had swollen shut like a fist and coax it flat again between clean blotters. A little pressure, a little patience, day after day, until it opened like a thing that had never been drowned. She took no sugar in her tea. She wore fingerless mitts against the cold grey wool worn thin at the knuckle. And she kept her place in the great ledger with a scrap of green ribbon. Just a scrap. The frayed end of something tied once through the top of the page. It was the only soft thing about her method. Everything else was iron. The house called her the bookwoman. Below stairs, that was all she was. She did not mind it. She had a task and a price. 15 guineas, agreed by letter, to catalogue, sort, and repair the drowned library before the year turned. 15 guineas was a great deal of money to a woman keeping a shop alone, and it was clean money. Earned, she meant to earn every penny of it and go home to Cambridge with her competence proved and her name good. She did not need warmth. She would have told you so herself. She did not need a fire that drew, or a kind word, or a man's help across a puddle. She had armoured herself so completely in usefulness that she could not be seen to need anything at all. That was her strength, and though she did not know it yet, that was the crack in her. The room they gave her to work in was not heated. Coal was dear that year. The whole estate was pulling its belt in. There was frost on the inside of the north windows most mornings, ferns of it, and Constance breathed on her fingers and went on writing. Item, author, date, condition waterline at 3 inches, spine perished, headband intact, boards warped, salvageable, she never complained. There was no one to complain to. The Duke of Corvedale she had seen perhaps 4 times in 6 weeks, and always at a distance. A tall, shut-in man of 40 or so, dark-coated, going quick down a corridor with his shoulders up around his ears, like a man expecting a blow. Edmund his name was, though no one under his roof would have dreamed of using it. He was the guardian of his father's library, and that library was the last unspoilt thing he owned. He carried the weight of a thinning year on his back. Land whispered to be for sale. The wagonway frost shut, the coal too costly to burn as freely as his father had burned it. He had not once addressed her. To him she was part of the wreckage, a fixture that had come with the flood. Now, here is the morning it turned. A letter came up to the hall with the second post. It was from London, from a Mr. Sowerby of Holywell Street, a dealer in old and rare books, a man the Duke had never heard of and never written to. The letter was smooth and commercial and terrible. It asked, with a bookseller's oily courtesy, whether His Grace wished to consign further volumes to us as before. As before. The Duke read it twice. He did not understand it, and not understanding it frightened him, and the fright turned in half a breath to rage. As before. What further volumes? Consigned by whom? Some hand had been selling his house out from under him. Some hand had reached into his father's shelves and turned them into money in London, and here was a stranger writing to ask if he might do it again. He did not know yet that the answer was in his own library, that a quiet woman on her knees among his ruined books had already written it out for him, plain as a bill, and left it waiting. He only knew he was ashamed and did not know why, and a proud man ashamed is the most dangerous thing in any house. He went down the corridor with the letter crushed in his fist. He came to the North Library. And there she was, the bookwoman, on her knees in the cold at the low shelf, a swollen folio open across her lap, her green ribbon marking the ledger beside her. Pruto the steward was with him, a step behind, as a steward always is. The Duke stopped in the doorway. He did not come in. He did not look at her, not truly. He looked at the room, at the endless ruined spines, at the sheer cost of the woman kneeling there, and he wanted the whole business gone out of his sight, so that he need not think about London or shame or how a man loses what his father built. And he said it to Pruto, over her bent head, as if she were a chair being carried out. Pay her and send her home. 4 words. Then he turned and was gone down the corridor, and the letter with him. Now 2 other people were in that doorway. James the footman, come up with word that the trap was ready, and Susan the housemaid with a scuttle she'd been told to bring, though Constance never learned who had ordered the coal for her, or that it had been the Duke himself 3 weeks back, seeing her work cold and never say a word, muttering to a footman on the stair to take the woman up a fire. She never learned that. It would have complicated her contempt, and she was not ready to have it complicated. James heard it. Susan heard it. Pay her and send her home. And Constance? Constance did not look up. She finished the shelf she was on. That is the thing to hold on to. She had 4 volumes still to enter from that low shelf, and she entered all 4. Author, date, condition. Her hand did not shake. The pen went on making its small, neat marks while the sentence settled over her like snow. Only when the last of the 4 was written did she cap the ink and sit back on her heels and let out one breath through her nose. She had been dismissed the way you dismiss a servant, over her head, to a third party, as if she had no ears, no name, no trade, no father who had taught her to read a watermark. Pay her and send her home. She had never in her life been paid such a wage of insult. But she would not give them the shape of it, not the footman, not the housemaid, not the sentence to carry down. So she rose, slow, her knees stiff from the cold floor, and she picked up her ledger, and she went on working as though nothing at all had happened. That was the whole of her answer. And it was a kind of magnificence. By supper the servants' hall had it word for word. You know how a house is. A sentence like that does not stay in the room it was spoken in. It goes down the back stairs faster than a man can walk. By the time the servants sat to their bread and dripping, the bookwoman had been sent home like a parlour-maid the length of the table, and every one of them had a face on about it. Some pleased, for she'd kept herself apart and pride draws no friends. But most of them uneasy, because a house that will move a person like a chair will move you like a chair, and they all knew it, down to the boot boy. By morning it was in the village. Nether Corve was a small place, a single street of grey cottages under the estate wall, and it lived on the hall as a barnacle lives on a hull. What happened up at the hall was the whole of its news, so by the time the frost was off the pump the next day, they had it in the shop, and the smithy, and the 2 pews of the chapel. The Duke had sent the Cambridge bookwoman packing without so much as her name in his mouth, over her head, to Pruto, pay her and send her home. The village weighed him for it, quietly, the way villages do, and found him a little smaller than he had been the day before. Constance heard none of this, or pretended to. She had a thing to finish, and she finished it. For 3 more days she worked. She did not hurry, and she did not slacken. She entered the last of the drowned books, the swollen quartos she'd pressed flat, the perished spines, the salvageable and the past saving. She made her repairs where repair could still be made. And she brought the great catalogue to its final entry, 5,000 volumes accounted for, 40 years of a library set down in one honest hand. Then she did a curious thing. She untied the green ribbon from the page, and she used it to tie the whole finished ledger shut. Think what that meant. That ribbon had been her marker, her private working thing, the one soft item in all her iron method. And now she made it the ribbon that bound the book closed. Her only signature, her only comment on the whole affair, not a word of reproach in 400 pages, and then this, a frayed scrap of green, tied in a plain knot, saying nothing and saying everything. She laid the catalogue square in the centre of the Duke's desk, where he could not miss it, and beside it she left a note. Not a reproach, not a word about herself, or her wage, or the sentence spoken over her head. Only 2 plain facts, the way a good tradeswoman leaves her account. The north wall is taking damp again behind the 3rd press, it will want attention before spring. And the flue in the east cottage does not draw. That was all. 2 chimneys and a wall. She would not so much as let him see that he had hurt her. But here is the hook of it, the thing you must carry forward with me. What had she written in that ledger? 400 pages, 40 years, every gap and every waterline, and 11 books that bore the wrong family's arms. She had left the whole truth of his house on his desk, tied with a green ribbon, and walked away before he ever opened it. Because that same afternoon she left. It was the first hard snow of the winter, the kind that comes down small and dry and means to stay. Constance Aldwin put on her grey coat and her thin gloves, and she took up her own case. No man offered to carry it, and she would not have let one, and she walked down the carriage drive and out through the estate gate and down the single street of Nether Corve, in the snow, past the shop and the pump and the chapel, past the windows. And every window knew her. That is the cruelty of a small place. They had all had the sentence by then. They all knew she'd been sent home like a parlour-maid. So they watched her go, some with pity and some with the low pleasure people take in another's fall, and not one of them could unknow it. The insult had been public before she ever felt it, and now her going was public too. Everyone saw her walk down. The shape of the thing was fixed. She would carry it as long as she stayed in that county, and she knew it, and she kept her chin level all the way down the street. She did not go home to Cambridge. That is the thing that trapped her. She had taken, weeks before, thinking to save her coach fare and her keep a cheap cottage at the low end of the village. The east cottage, as it happened, the very one whose flue she'd named in her note. A single room and a scullery, damp in the wall, a hearth that smoked. She had meant to bide there a few nights, finish and go. But the snow had come, and the wagon-way was frost-shut, and there was no coach out of Nether Corve till the thaw. She was paid her 15 guineas clean in her purse, and she was stranded in a cold cottage in a county that had watched her be thrown away, and there was no coal to be had. That is not a figure of speech. Understand the year. The estate was pulling in. The wagonway that brought the coal up was shut with frost. What fuel there was, the village hoarded against its own hearths, and would not sell to a stranger at any price, least of all the stranger the Duke had sent packing. She had money and nothing to buy with it. She had a chimney that would not draw, and no fire worth the name to send up it. The first evening she knelt at that mean hearth, and tried to light it, and the smoke came back down the flue into the room, and set her coughing, and she opened the door to the snow to clear it, and knelt again, and tried again. A jackdaw had built in that chimney, likely, or the damp had killed the drawer, or both. Whatever it was, the fire would not take. It smoked and sulked and died, and Constance Aldwin, who needed nothing, who could not be seen to need anything, sat in her coat in the dark, in a cold that got into the bone, and did not cry, because crying was a thing she had trained herself out of long ago. Word of that got round too, in time. Villages miss nothing. Dr. Pallister was the first to come. The village surgeon, a decent sandy-haired man near her own age, who had marked her weeks before at the chapel and thought her the most interesting thing to arrive in Nether Corve in a decade. He came on the second day with a pretext about the damp being bad for the chest, and he saw the state of the hearth, and he offered, plainly and kindly, to have coal sent down from his own store. Constance thanked him, and refused. She could not take it. Do you see? To take it would be to be seen to need it, and worse, to take it as charity from a man who esteemed her, which would make it a thing owed, a thing with strings. She had just been made a public gift of humiliation. She would not now be made a public object of pity. So she thanked Dr. Pallister with a warmth that cost her something, and she sent his coal away, and she sat by her cold hearth and was proud. He went off down the snowy street shaking his head, half in love and wholly baffled. The good second man who does everything right and is refused for it. There is one in every story. He is worth your kindness. He does not win. So the days began to count down, and here is the clock I want you to feel ticking under everything that follows. It was the season of Christmas. The 12 days of it. 12 days from Christmas to Twelfth night, when the greenery comes down and the year truly turns. In that country and that faith, each of those 12 days was a small, holy heartbeat, and the whole village counted them. Constance had come down into her cold cottage with the 12 days barely begun, 12 days of hard frost between her and any thaw, any coach, any way home. 12 days at a smoking hearth with 15 guineas she could not spend on the one thing she needed. Hold that clock. It will matter more than you know. Now let us go back up the hill. To the hall. To the man at the desk, because for 2 whole days the Duke of Corvedale did not open the catalogue at all. He had come back from his black morning, and there it was on his desk, this squat ledger tied shut with a frayed green ribbon, and beside it a note in a clear tradeswoman's hand about damp and a flue. He had glanced at the note and felt an obscure irritation and pushed the whole business aside. He had other troubles. The letter from Holywell Street sat in his coat like a coal itself, and he could not make sense of it, and it gnawed him. As before. Consign further volumes as before. He wrote a stiff reply and tore it up. He wrote another. He did not send it. He did not know what he was answering. He heard, of course, that she had gone. Prudhoe told him, in the flat, careful voice a good steward uses when he does not approve and cannot say so. The bookwoman was gone down to the village, Your Grace. The work is finished. She left the catalogue. Then, it's done, said the Duke, and turned to his window. But it was not done. It sat on his desk with a green ribbon round it, waiting, and on the second evening, alone. With the fire low and the letter from London still burning a hole in his conscience, he pulled it toward him at last, and worked the knot loose, and opened it. He meant to glance, to confirm the count and be finished. He did not glance. He read. Because it was not a mere list, that is the thing that caught him and would not let him go. A lesser hand would have given him 5,000 lines of author and title, and no more. She had given him that, yes, every book his house held, set down in order, but she had given him something no one had given Corvedale in 40 years. She had given him the truth of it. Every gap where a run should have been complete, and was not, she had noted it, quiet and exact. Set of Hume, 7 volumes, volumes 3 and 5 wanting. Where a book had drowned, she had written the water line, 3 inches, 5 inches, the very height of the flood in the very book, so that reading it he could see the water rise. Where she had mended, she had said so, plain and unboastful, rebacked, pressed, headband secured. 40 years of losses and injuries to a great library, set down without one word of comment, without one word of reproach, and it was the most damning thing he had ever read, precisely because she had not tried to damn anyone. He heard her voice in it. That was the strange, undoing thing. A woman he had never once spoken to, whose name he had said only to get rid of her, and here in 400 pages of the driest possible prose, was a person, a whole exact honest person, closer to him than anyone had come in years. Every entry was her. Her patience, her eye, her refusal to lie about a thing to spare anyone's feelings. And then he came to the 11. Near the back, among the finer volumes that had stood high and dry above the flood, she had entered 11 books, and beside each, in the condition column where another cataloguer would have written nothing, she had written a small, careful, terrible note. Bears the armorial bookplate of the Fenwick Library of Blyth. And again, Fenwick of Blyth. And again, 11 times. Books standing on Corvedale shelves, under the Corvedale roof, that carried inside their covers the coat of arms of another house entirely. She had even added, in one place, 6 dry words, the only thing in 400 pages that came near a remark. Somebody's shelves got muddled. Once, the Duke sat very still. He looked at the 11 Fenwick books listed in her clear hand, and he took the letter from Holywell Street out of his coat and laid it on the desk beside the ledger, to consign further volumes as before. And the two things began, slowly, horribly, to fit together in his hands like the two halves of a broken plate. His own books, gone to London. Other men's books standing in their places, and a woman he had sent home like a parlour-maid had found the whole of it, and set it down, and tied it with a green ribbon, and left it on his desk without a word, while he stood in a doorway and called her a thing to be paid off. He did not sleep that night. In the morning he did something no one at Corvedale had seen him do in a year. He called for his horse before the frost was off the ground, and he rode down, not to the village, not yet, he was not ready for the village, but along the low road to the parish registry, and then home to the muniment room where the old estate papers lay in their boxes, furred with dust. He wanted the years. He wanted the name of the man who had kept his father's library in the years the gaps began. He wanted to know when the Fenwick books had come, and by whose hand, and where his own had gone. He was, for the first time, not closing the matter. He was opening it. And a proud man who has spent his whole life shutting doors does not know, when he opens one, that he cannot shut it again. That evening he sat down and wrote a letter, not the stiff torn-up thing of before. A letter under his own name, in his own hand, to Mr. Sowerby of Holywell Street, London. He asked, plainly and traceably, on Corvedale paper with the Corvedale arms, exactly which volumes had been consigned to that house, by whom, on what dates, and for what sums. He signed it. He sealed it, and he understood, sealing it, that he had just put his own name to a question that could not be unasked, a question that would go to London and come back with an answer, and that the answer would name someone and shame someone, and could not be tidied away in silence ever again. He might have sent Prudhoe. That would have been the Corvedale way. Let the steward carry it. Let the buffer take the weight. He did not. He carried this one himself, to the post, in his own hand. And down in the village, at the low end of the street, in the east cottage, with the flue that would not draw, Constance Aldwin knelt at her cold hearth in the dark, and tried, for the fourth night running, to make a fire hold. The smoke came down. She opened the door to the snow. Somewhere up the hill a great house had just begun, too late, or perhaps not too late, to understand what it had thrown away. She did not know it. She only knew the cold, and the count of the days, and the green ribbon gone from her hand and left up at the hall, tied round the truth, in a room where no one yet had thought to look. The letter went to London on the morning coach, and London is not near. So the Duke waited, and a man who has never in his life waited for another man's answer learns, in the waiting, how long a day can be. His mother did not help him wait. The Dowager Duchess of Corvedale came down each morning with a small, hard purpose fixed in her face. She wanted the library settled. She wanted the whole wet ruin of it valued, boxed, and gone. And the room made a morning room for Lady Harriet Sedgwick, who was, she reminded him, still expected, still willing, still exactly the sort of quiet, safe marriage a thinning estate required. The bookwoman left a ledger, the Dowager said one morning, tapping it where it lay. Impertinent thing. She has written in the margins as if the house belonged to her. She has written nothing in the margins, the Duke said. That is rather the trouble. His mother did not understand him. He had not expected her to. He had only begun, that week, to understand himself. Because he had read the catalogue now, properly, not the glance of the first night, but page by page, 400 pages, by candle, twice through. And she had been right. There were no margins, no complaint, no little cough of blame you could point to and dismiss. Only the books, only 40 years of them. Every gap where a book should stand and did not. Every water line up a spine. Every mend she had made with her own hands and set down plainly, repaired, headband relaid, board reattached. It was the most honest thing anyone had put on paper in that house in his lifetime, and it had been done by a woman he had never once looked at. He read the 11 again. The 11 with the wrong arms. The Fenwick of Blythe bookplate, the little armorial shield that was not his, pasted inside 11 fine volumes standing quiet on his own shelves. And he read Sowerby's letter again. Further volumes as before, and the two things lay in his hands like two halves of a broken plate, and he turned them until they fit. Outside, the weather played at his heart without knowing it. One afternoon a soft wind came up from the sea, and the eaves began to drip, and he thought, foolishly, of a thaw. Then the wind backed north in the night, and the drip froze into teeth along the gutters, and the frost came down harder than before. 12 days to 12th night. He counted them the way a boy counts. And somewhere below the hill, though he did not yet let himself think it plainly, a woman he had sent away was counting the same days at a colder hearth. The answer from London came on the 4th day. Mr. Sowerby of Holywell Street wrote a careful hand, the hand of a man who has learned to be careful. He was, he wrote, most gratified to hear from His Grace directly. He begged to set out, as requested, the particulars. Over some years he named them, the 50s, the 60s. A number of volumes had been consigned to his house from Corvedale, and honest prices paid, and he had the receipts to show it, every one signed. Signed, he wrote, by His Grace's steward of that time. A Mr. Caudle, The Duke set the letter down very slowly on the desk, beside the catalogue, beside the green ribbon. Caudle. He remembered Caudle the way you remember furniture from childhood. A steward of his father's day, a dry, dependable man who had left the estate the year the old Duke died, retired with thanks and a small pension to a house near the coast, and died himself not long after. Trusted for 30 years. And here it was, in a London bookseller's careful hand. Caudle had taken them. Not stolen in the night, worse, cleverer than that. He had sold Corvedale's own good books, the rare ones, the ones that would fetch a price, 1 and 2 at a time down the years to Holywell Street. And then, so the shelves should never look bald, so no Duke walking his own library should ever count a gap, he had gone to the sales of broken-up houses and bought cheap matched volumes to stand in their places. Same size, same colour of calf. 3 inches, 5 inches, ranged neat by the spine so the eye slid past. And once, careless or hurried, or simply certain no one would ever look, he had shelved 11 that still wore another family's bookplate inside. The Fenwick of Blyth, a library sold up, scattered, its arms pasted in, never scraped out. £600, the Duke reckoned, reading down Sowerby's honest columns. Perhaps more. Skimmed off his father's shelves across the years while his father lived, and no one the wiser, because the man whose office it was to know was the man doing it. His whole black mood of that grey morning came back to him, the morning he had said the sentence. He had woken to Sowerby's first letter, consigned further volumes as before, and read in it, without understanding it, the sense that his own house was being sold out from under him by hands he could not see, and in that helpless rage he had walked into the bookroom and looked at the one person there and got rid of her. Pay her and send her home. As if she were the leak, as if she were the theft. She was the only honest thing in the room. She had knelt 6 weeks in the cold and written his house true, and he had thrown her out for it. He sat with that a long time. The candle burned down an inch, then another. Then he did the thing a proud man finds hardest of all. He decided to put it right, and, being still the man he was, he set about putting it right in exactly the wrong way. He sent Prudhoe. He counted out money, more than her fee, a great deal more, and he took the 11 Fenwick volumes down himself and had them wrapped, and he wrote a short stiff message that was almost, but not quite, an apology, and he gave the whole of it to his steward and told him to carry it down to the East Cottage and make it right. Prudhoe went. Prudhoe always went. He was Northumberland born and decent to the bone, and he had hated carrying the First Order more than he had ever hated anything in his office, and he thought, going down the frozen street with the money and the books, that at least now he carried the mending of it. He knocked. He stood in the falling dusk with his hat in his hand and did it as gently as a good man could. Constance opened the door 3 inches. The cold poured past her out of the dark house. There was no glow behind her, no firelight, only the grey. Prudhoe held out the packet and the purse and spoke the Duke's stiff message, softened by his own kindness. His Grace wished her to have this. His Grace regretted. His Grace hoped the matter might be considered closed. She looked at the money. She looked at the good steward's unhappy face. She did not raise her voice. She never once raised her voice. "Mr. Prudhoe," she said, "you are a decent man, and I am sorry it is you standing in this doorway. But you will take it back. Miss Aldwin, he is doing it again," she said. "Do you not see it? He dismissed me over my head to you, and now he apologizes to me over my head, through you, a message and a purse sent down by the steward. It is the very same sentence. It is pay her and send her home with the words changed round." She drew a breath in the cold. "If His Grace has something to say to me, His Grace knows where the door is. He has known for 6 weeks. Good evening." And she closed it. Not hard, She had not the heart to slam a door on Prudhoe. She closed it soft and stood behind it in the dark, with her hand flat against the wood, shaking, and did not cry, because she had decided 40 years ago, it felt like, that she would not be the sort of woman who cried at a duke's door. Prudhoe carried it all the way back up the hill. The money, the books, and, harder, the plain shape of what she had said, which he understood at once because he had felt it himself. He set it down in front of the Duke, and, being decent, did not spare him. "She'll not take it, Your Grace. And I'll tell you why, for you'll not like it. She says an apology carried by me is the same insult carried by me. She says you did it over her head twice now." Prudhoe turned his hat in his hands. "She's right, Your Grace. God help me, she's right." The Duke of Corvedale sat very still. He had thought the difficulty was the doing of the thing. He saw now the difficulty was the being seen to do it. He had said his sentence in a doorway, in front of James the footman and Susan the housemaid, and it had run down the servants' stairs and out the kitchen door, and down the whole length of Nether Corve before she had finished packing her tools. The wound had been public. It had been witnessed, and a witnessed wound cannot be healed in a back room with the door shut. It cannot be paid off by a servant in the dark. It has to be mended where it was made, in the open, in front of the same eyes. He understood, at last, the thing the whole story had been trying to teach him. He had said it in front of the servants, so the apology would have to be carried on his own shoulder, in front of them all. There was one more thing he did not yet know, and Dr. Pallister told him. The surgeon had ridden up to the hall about a labourer's broken wrist, and the Duke, who did not usually speak to the village surgeon beyond a nod, kept him at the door and asked, stiffly, after the health of the parish, and Pallister, who was an honest man and a little in love and therefore quite unable to keep it in, said what was on his mind. "There's a lady in the East Cottage, Your Grace, cataloguing your books till lately, who will take the fever if this holds. Her chimney will not draw. It never has. There's a jackdaw's nest in the flue this 10-year, and the cottage stood empty, and there's not 100 weight of coal to be bought in Nether Corve this side of Twelfth night, for the waggonway's frozen, and what's here is spoken for." He said it plainly, and a little hard, because he thought this proud man had put her there and did not care. "She'll not take help. I've offered. She calls it charity and shows me the door, but somebody ought to know she's freezing, and I don't much care who I tell." The Duke stood in his own doorway and took it like a blow and did not defend himself, because there was no defence. Her chimney would not draw. She had written it in the note she left him. The flue in the East Cottage does not draw. He had read the words and not understood them. He had thought her cold, and never once thought what cold meant, for 12 days, with no fire and no fuel to buy. She had left him, on his own desk, the exact map of her own suffering, written without a word of reproach. The north wall takes damp, the East Cottage flue does not draw, and he had filed it under books. "Thank you, Dr. Pallister," the Duke said. "You have told me the one thing I needed." It was 12th night eve. The Duke went out to his own coal house in the yard, past the stable boys who stopped and stared, and he took a sack, an ordinary sack, and he filled it himself with his own hands, the good dry coal, and he heaved it, and he got it up onto his own shoulder. He was 40 years old, and he had never in his life carried a sack of coal. He staggered under it and found his balance, and he would not let James take it, and he would not let Prudhoe take it, and he would not have the pony cart. "No," he said, "this one I carry." And the Duke of Corvedale walked down his own hill in the blue dusk, with a sack of coal on his shoulder and no servant beside him. Nether Corve saw him come. Of course it did. It was the hour the lamps were lit and the shutters not yet closed, and one by one, all down the street, the faces came to the little frosted windows. The blacksmith, the widow heron, the children with their breath on the glass. They had watched Constance Aldwin walk down this same street a fortnight since, carrying her own case, sent home like a parlour-maid. Now they watched the Duke come down it the other way, bent under a coal sack, his fine coat grey with coal dust and white with snow. Alone, a Duke carries nothing. Everyone in that valley knew it in their bones. A Duke's whole life is that other men carry for him. And here he came, carrying, in front of them all. He said nothing to the street. He did not look up at the windows. He knew they were there, that was the whole of it, but the words were not for them. He walked the length of Nether Corve under his burden and stopped at the low door of the east cottage and set the sack down on the step and knocked. She opened it 3 inches, as before, expecting Pallister, expecting anyone but this. The Duke of Corvedale stood on her step, breathing hard, dusted head to foot, the sack slumped against his boot. She said nothing. She had not the least idea what to say. "Miss Aldwin," he said. His voice was not the doorway voice, the voice that had disposed of her. It was low, and it was uncertain, and it was entirely his own. "I have not come to send anyone. There is no one with me. I have come myself." He looked down at the sack, as if surprised to find it there. "I have brought you some coal. And Dr. Pallister tells me your chimney will not draw. I know something of chimneys. I should like to look at it, if you will let me in." She stood a long moment. The cold went past her into the dark house behind. And here is the truth of Constance Aldwin, the whole armoured heart of her. She did not open the door because she forgave him. She opened it because the flue needed sweeping, and here, absurdly, was a man who said he knew how. "It is the flue," she said, as if they were 2 tradespeople met on a job. "I have had smoke down it 4 nights running. If you know how, I will not stop you." And she stepped back and let the Duke of Corvedale into her one cold room. There was nothing in it to be ashamed of, and nothing in it to be proud of. A bed, a table, a stool, her leather roll of tools laid neat, her purse with the 15 guineas she had earned clean and would not spend on his charity, and a black, cold hearth with a mound of dead smoke fall in it. He took off his ruined coat and laid it over the stool. He rolled his sleeves. And the Duke of Corvedale knelt down on the hearthstone of a rented cottage and put his arm up into the chimney. He found it at once. A jackdaw's nest, 10 years of it, packed hard 3 feet up, and behind it the damp black soot cake, and above that the cold plug of air that no fire could shift. He worked it loose with his hands, and it came down in a filthy rush over his shoulders and his shirt and his fine dark head, and he coughed and kept working, and she stood over him with a candle, and God help her, nearly smiled. He drew out the whole matted ruin of the nest and laid it aside. He reached up again and felt the draught change, felt the black square of night open clean above him at last, the cold air pulling straight and true. "There," he said from the ash, not looking round. "It's clear." She laid the fire herself, because she would trust no man with the laying of a fire. His coal, her hands. And she set the light to it, and the little flame took the kindling and reached the coal, and instead of rolling out into the room in a grey choke as it had 4 nights running, the smoke stood up straight and went where smoke is meant to go, up and away and out into the frozen dark over Nether Corve. The fire caught. It brightened. It began, for the first time, to draw. They both watched it. The heat came off it into the room, real heat. The first warmth those walls had held all winter, and it lit her face and his filthy one from below. "The chimney's mended," the Duke said quietly. She looked at the fire, not at him. She was quiet a moment. Then she said, in a low, even voice, "So is the rest of it, then. That was all." That was the whole of her forgiveness, and it was enough. And he had the sense at last not to reach for more of it than she had given. She made tea. She had a little left. She made it and handed him a cup, and he took it, black, and she did not offer him sugar. And he did not ask, because he had learned, from her own catalogue, from 6 weeks of never once looking, the one small, useless, precise fact that Miss Constance Aldwin takes no sugar. He did not say he loved her. It was not the night for it, and he was not the man for it, not yet, and she would have shown him the door if he had tried. He said, instead, looking at the fire and not at her, the truest thing he had. "You wrote my house honest in a week." He turned the cup in his black hands. "I said one sentence over your head, and it has taken me 12 days to carry it back down that hill myself." She did not answer that either. But she let him sit. She let him stay and watch the fire hold till the coal was well caught and the room was warm and the frost stood back from the little window. That was the thaw. Not spoken. A degree at a time, across a hearth, on 12th night. He brought her, before he left, one thing he had carried inside his coat all the way down the hill, kept dry against himself. The Fenwick Herbal. The finest of the 11, an old physic garden book full of pressed flat plants and careful Latin. "This one goes back to Blythe," he said with a letter, "in the open under my name. But I should like you to hold it first. You are the only person alive who knew it stood on the wrong shelf." And she took it, and, having nothing else, she untied the green ribbon from her wrist where she had carried it since the day she left the hall, and she tied it round the herbal, round the wrong-armed book that was going home. Her signature again. Her only comment. The next morning the Duke of Corvedale did the last hard thing, and did it in the open. He had the household called, not all of them, but enough, Prudhoe and James and Susan, the two who had stood in the doorway and heard him say it, and his mother, the dowager, cold and upright in her chair. And he laid the green-ribboned catalogue open on the long table before them all, and he told them the truth of it, in his own voice, plainly, the way it had happened. He named Caudle. He said the old steward's name aloud, and said what the man had done, sold the good books down the years to Holywell Street, £600 of them, and stood cheap-matched copies in their places, and left another family's arms shelved 11 times over in the doing of it. He said that Miss Aldwin, whom he had dismissed, had been the one to find it, that her ledger was the first honest account of the library in 40 years, that the theft was old and hers was not the hand in it, that the fault of these last weeks, the whole of it, had been his own. "I said a thing in front of you," he said, to the 2 servants who had heard him say it. "You will hear me unsay it in front of you now. I was wrong in the doorway. I have been down to the East Cottage, on my own feet to say so, and I would have you carry the true story below stairs as fast as you carried the other one." Prudhoe stood a little straighter than he had stood in weeks. The shameful office was lifted off him at last, in the open, where it had been laid on him. James looked at the floor, and then, carefully, at his master, and something in the boy settled, and the Dowager Duchess of Corvedale said not one word. She sat with the catalogue open before her and the county's verdict already forming outside her walls, and for once in her life the rules had no face to wear and nothing to say. Lady Harriet Sedgwick, hearing within the week which way the wind at Corvedale had turned, wrote a gracious note and withdrew to her aunt's in the south, and was by every account not sorry. To London went the law of the bookshop, no violence in it, no drama, only the slow certain grind of the trade putting itself right. Sowerby of Holywell Street, faced under the Duke's own name, with his own signed receipts, was made to open his books and disgorge what he still held and name where the rest had gone. Corvedale's own volumes began, one by one, over that year, to come home from the trade, brought back where they must be, restored where they could be. And the 11 Fenwick books went north to Blythe with an open letter that named the wrong done and set it right in public, so that no shadow of it should ever fall on the woman who had found it. A year turned, it was Candlemas again, and snow again, but a different snow, the kind you watch from inside a warm room and do not fear. The North Library at Corvedale Hall was restored, The water lines were gone from the walls, the damp drawn out of the third press at last, the shelves rehung, the good recovered books back in their true places, and the wrong ones sent home. And the fire drew. Every chimney in that wing drew clean and straight, for the Duke had, that spring, developed an unexpected and thorough interest in the sweeping of flues. Miss Constance Aldwin ran that library now, under her own name, on a proper salary, and her father's small Cambridge shop had grown famous in a quiet way as the trade told and retold the story of the cataloguer who wrote a Duke's house honest and would not take his charity through a servant. She took no sugar still. She wore her fingerless mitts still, out of habit, though the room was warm now. The Dowager Duchess came in one afternoon and found her at the long table and looked for a while at the shelves, orderly and true, and said, because she could not help herself, "It is a great deal of fuss over old books." "It is," said Constance, not looking up from her work. 40 years of fuss. I have written it all down, so it need never be got up again. And the Dowager, who had learned at least the smallest thing, said nothing further, and went out. On the table between them, closed and finished, lay the new catalogue. The complete one. The honest one. The whole library set down true at last, every book in its right place, every arms the right arms, 40 years of loss accounted and mended, and tied round it, holding it shut, her only signature, her one quiet comment on the whole affair, was the scrap of green ribbon, the same ribbon that had marked her cold page, and tied the truth on his desk, and gone north to Blyth, and come home again. It had begun as the private mark of a woman no one thought to look at. It ended as the seal on a house set right. He said his one sentence in front of the servants, so the apology could not be sent. It had to be carried on his own shoulder down the whole length of the street, past every window that had watched her go. That is the shape of it. A thing broken in the open can only be mended in the open, whatever it costs, whoever is watching. If your work was ever dismissed in one careless sentence you were never even meant to hear, I hope, wherever you are, someone carried the coal back up the hill. Tell me your city in the comments, and I'll read every one.